Hello and welcome in, Puckheads, to another slate breakdown, four-game slate today for March 21st, 2018. I'm your buddy Choppadong. You can always follow me out on Twitter at Choppadong. Follow me inside DFS Army, where I am a coach and contributor, and I'll do a lot of talking on a daily basis with our VIP members and hope to get them up to speed, make them better DFS players. In fact, we had a shout-out to DFS Army gal last night, her first shot at a GPP, and she took it down. That's pretty impressive stuff. She went straight on in with a $25 single entry GPP, and last night needed a couple of points out of Evander Kane and ended up dragging the victory down for, $150 or so. So congratulations there. I'm telling you, you guys, when you join dfsarmy.com/ref/3, that's the URL you put in. The link will be in the comment section of the video. When you join, many of our people hit the ground running immediately. Our job is to find your leaks in your game, talk to you about bankroll management, contest selection, maybe find your style and what type of lineup you tend to build, and then basically show you what contest you should be playing to maximize your chances. We don't have all cash players. We don't have all GPP players. We usually have a hybridized blend between the two, and we're going to show you how to pull that off so that you've got some cash for the safety to grind your bankroll, but some upside exposure into those GPPs. But the cash safety slows your bleeding process down and slows your swings up and down a little bit so that you're not going through massive long downswings. And yet the cash games will kind of, while they slow down the variance of the GPP type stuff, you still always hold on to some of those tournaments and some of those leagues and upside contests so that you then, when you have good nights, you maximize your winning process. And that's what builds your bankroll over time. It isn't the, I'm only a GPP player. Man, screw that. I'm only a cat. No, you're not. You need to be a combination of the two, and that's part of what we show you how to do inside dfsarmy.com/ref/3. So why don't you follow that link at the bottom of the description today and give me a like, a subscribe, a follow, a retweet out on Twitter, whatever. Keep the content coming because it's a lot of fun to deliver for you guys. I get a lot of comments. I get a lot of compliments, and I really appreciate that. It lets me know that my time isn't a complete waste when I do this. I do this as much for you as I do for me in my own process, because by constantly holding myself accountable, coaching tip, whatever you want to call it for you guys, by holding yourself accountable on a daily basis and focusing more on a process and getting a process and a routine down, you're going to become a better player. I like sharing that with you because I like kind of helping people. I've gotten a lot out of the industry, and I like helping other people get a lot out of it too, because then I feel like I'm kind of giving back to the community that's given me a lot of fun in the hobby as well. So anyway, without blathering on for too much, let's move on, dive into the four-game slate. Follow that link in the description, become a VIP, you won't regret it. When I look at the goalies today and the four games that we have, I'm looking at Ranta, and I don't trust Chad Johnson at home in Buffalo. Don't trust Carey Price facing the Penguins. Don't trust the Smith. His game log's terrible. Don't trust Kubinik because I don't know what St. Louis team I'm going to get. And they're a defensive team in Boston, but they're a defensive team in St. Louis too. And I just don't know where that one's going to end up going. I don't trust Jake Allen. His game log is up and down, up and down. John Gibson, I do trust a little bit. Don't like goalies typically on the road. Don't trust Mike Smith all that much because Anaheim's running kind of hot, and Calgary's been a little leaky lately with their lines. So again, it's not a great slate for goalies. There's no one slam dunk. I think there are a couple of good ones though. We're going to talk Gibson and we're going to talk Ranta. Here's what I do. When I compare John Gibson, I look back at his last 10 games and I see he's $8,800 and I say, okay, that's probably where most people are going to start, probably where I should start, whatever. And I look back at his game log and I find that he's 8-2 in his last 10 games. That's very impressive. I looked at he's only got 2 dud performances in his last 10 games. A dud to me is under 10 fantasy points on Fanduel. That's pretty impressive, only to a 20% chance of a dud. And then I look at his 20-plus games because it's typically what I want out of a goalie. I want 20-plus points. And I see that he's done it 7 times in his last 10 games. So I've got a 70% chance at a solid outing, a 20% chance at a dud. And honestly, over 30 points is pretty darn good, kind of his upside range. And when I look at that, I see he's done that 4 times. So a 40% chance of testing his upside and a 20% chance of testing his floor. I like that. That's a good cash-safe goalie. Using those terms and those percentages should hopefully paint a picture for you that he's pretty consistently on the upside, not on the downside. Okay, of his performance. But now I see that $8,800 and I go, I wonder if I can find somebody for cheaper that gives me about the same. production, because then that would incentivize me to take the cheaper goalie, correct? So what I'm doing is I'm looking at Antti Raanta here, and when I look at his game log, I see, and I don't like going on the road again, but I'm going into Buffalo. Buffalo is not as intimidating a place to play right now as Calgary is. So that's maybe a little safer offense to go in there and face. But I look at Raanta's game log, and I see that he got subbed in for a goalie on a start that was going the wrong way. And so I don't really count that particular game because it's not a full 60 minutes. There was no decision eligible and whatnot. So that one I just kind of scrap those when I see those. So I'm looking at a 9-game sample over that 10-game window because the one game doesn't count. And when I look back over those 9 games, I see that he is 7-2, which is the same, 2 losses, same as Gibson. I look at only 1 dud, and I go, yeah, maybe that 10th game would have been a dud. I don't know. But it's a 10%, 11% chance at a dud, so it's better. Then I look at his 20-plus games, and I see he also has 7, just like Gibson, so that's the same. And then I look at his 30-plus games for his real upside, and he's got 5 as opposed to Gibson's 4. So he's got a little bit lower dud ratio and a little bit higher 30-plus ratio. It means the dude's hot standing on his head. He's probably not really as good as he's playing right now, but while he's playing that hot, I want to ride that train. Going into Buffalo doesn't intimidate me that much, and you throw in a $1,200 to $1,300 savings on top of it, and I say hello. So that's going to be probably my goalie tonight. I don't know if it'll be the industry's goalie. It's going to probably come down to Raanta or Gibson. And I would hope that the industry goes for Gibson because I think that's the mistake. And I think that Raanta gives me the advantage when it comes to that. But again, I don't care where the industry goes when I play most of my cash games. And I don't care even in GPPs that I don't care about the goalie. I'm trying to nut the goalie every night. I don't want to take a lot of risk to do it, but I'm trying to nut the goalie every night because that gives me the best boost in my lineup. Hockey is volatile enough that my $3,800 punt can score 2 goals and make up for, Sidney Crosby having a crappy night. That's just the way hockey goes. So it's just like baseball. Your starting pitcher may be the foundation of your team, but getting low ownership at the pitching spot isn't necessarily as important as when you have so many choices of skaters or so many choices of baseball bats to choose from. You can stack different teams. You can find different value. You can always differentiate in your offensive players in those 2 sports. So that makes those goalies, to me, very, very minimal as far as ownership percentage is concerned and game theory and all that crap. Just pick the best one and move on. So I think Raanta's the best. I think that Gibson's not a bad second choice. In fact, it's a good second choice. But that's pretty much what I'm going to do. When I talk about the games themselves, let's talk really quickly about where we maybe see these games going. Let's target some offenses that we might want to stack up. When I see Arizona going into Buffalo, I see that Arizona's top line is scoring 3 goals in the last 3 games. I see their second line is scoring 3 goals in the last 3 games as well. So when I see that, I'm looking for Buffalo's defense. How bad is Buffalo's defense? Well, the top line in Buffalo has given up 2 goals in their last 3 games, so they're maybe a little bit leaky. That tells me that if I can prove that the 1 targets the 1, or if I look and see that the 2 is targeting the 1, that's the Arizona offense that I'm going to want to stick on Chad Johnson. And the reverse goes into play too. I mean, I do believe that we've got a decent rolling offense in Arizona going up against a line or so in Buffalo that maybe isn't great. So I think there's an advantage there. When I look at the Buffalo lines, the offense, I don't see anyone scoring, 2 and 3 goals in the last 3 games. So nobody's really rolling all that hot. But what I do see is that Arizona's leaking. Arizona's third line has given 3 goals in 3 games, and they've given up their top line's given 2 goals in 2 games. So really and truly, Buffalo's also in a pretty good spot tonight because Arizona's defense is suspect. It's weird that Arizona's defense is suspect when Raanta's been standing on his head. But that's what you get. You can bend these numbers out of this game any way you want. You can sell me on Arizona's in a great spot. You can sell me on Buffalo's in a great spot. You can sell me on the game might shoot out. You can sell me on the fact that both offenses really and truly across a season suck, and they're not going to score any goals at all. I mean, the sky's the limit in this game. I think that there's a lot of players that are viable from this game. I will say there's a shot advantage to Arizona. Arizona has the worst shooting team in the league on the season, 31st. But the Buffalo Sabres allow the 27th most shots against. So even though Arizona has bad shooting, they're still going to outperform their averages because they're going up against one of the worst. That makes sense? It doesn't matter. I'm not necessarily always looking for the top shooting team going against the worst shot allowed team. I'm looking for anybody that's going to get a bump or anybody that's going to get their shots suppressed as a way to kind of bump that matchup up or down in my favorite, my favoritism or the way I would be leaning towards skaters. And that leans again towards Buffalo being in a decent spot. Buffalo should get more shots on goal than usual. The problem with Buffalo, and here's how you bend the numbers, the problem with Buffalo, they don't really shoot a lot. So it doesn't really threaten Ronta a ton, but maybe it does. You see where I'm going? The numbers don't really point in a real clear direction tonight, and that's the problem with tonight's slate. When we scroll down to Montreal and Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh's coming off a back-to-back. You can see the back end of the back-to-back, and they're running a goal that's going to allow some goals. Pittsburgh's going to have to score to win this game because I think Montreal's going to score. And I think that that's what's going to really kind of make the deal here. Now, when I look at the spot that Montreal's in, they're not really offensively all that great. They've got some guys running some value. So, again, I don't understand why their scoring lines aren't popping in those windows. But, in Pittsburgh, looking at them defensively, they're not too bad. They're not showing up as being really, really leaky. And sometimes they do show up that way. But right now, they're not running, too terrible on defense. So that maybe suppresses Montreal's ability a little bit because Montreal's not hot, Pittsburgh's not cold. But Casey dismissed game log's terrible, so something's going on. The dude's either letting in some softies or something. So I still expect Montreal to be okay. They're not one of my top picks tonight. When I look at Pittsburgh's offense, the second line has scored 3 goals in its last 3 games, and the third line, the Kessel line, has scored 2 in its last 3. When I look at how they match up in Montreal, Montreal's top line is not good. So what I want to show you is where we dive into the line matching, because this was really, really telling. When I go down here to Pittsburgh, and I want to see that second line and that third line, the Malkin line and the Kessel line, I want to see who they match up with in Montreal. Recent game, too, so that's a good sign. So I look at the recent game, Drouin, Gallagher, and Byron, almost 90% of the time. The Malkin line's going up against the Drouin line, 95% of the time he's out there with Drouin. And the Gallagher line, the Gallagher's out there 90% of the time. And this top line here with Byron on it is out there 86% of the time against the 2. To me, that tells me Malkin's line is actually getting the top line, the leaky Montreal line. Not the Crosby line, not the Kessel line. Because when I go change this to the Kessel line, go to Pittsburgh, where's Kessel at? There's Kessel. Give me Montreal again, same date. Watch this. All of a sudden, the Kessel line gets the Hudon line. Maybe even the third or fourth line. Nothing in that Drouin Gallagher top line, the leaky line. Nothing. That tells me that third line's been matching up against the 3s and 4s, and Montreal's 3 and 4 isn't necessarily leaking right now. It's the top line. So I want Hornquist, Malkin, Hagelin. Those are the guys I'm focused on. Those are the guys that on paper have the best chance at success. Doesn't mean Crosby can't go out and put out a hat trick tonight. Just means that it's not as likely. It means that the Malkin line's more likely to do, what it's going to do. So when we go back to where were we? We were on that top page with the goalies. When I go back and open that one up again and we scroll down, that's why I like Pittsburgh so much. And I think that everybody's going to be on the Malkin line. They all like the number 2. When I go down to the Boston and St. Louis, the thing I'll tell you about this, St. Louis is in a weird spot. St. Louis is fighting for a playoff spot. Not only is St. Louis fighting for a playoff spot, they're on the outside looking in, so they have to give their best effort. Now, I don't know what their best effort is. First 2 months of the year, we were all over that top line. It was up there with Tampa Bay as the best line in hockey. And then it went through 2 months or 3 months of just dumps and dump after dump. And we lost their identity, and we don't know who the hell they are. And they went from being buyers at the trade deadline to being sellers, sort of. Jake Allen, in his head, can't stop, paper airplanes. And then you've got Hutton, who got hurt and kind of faded down the stretch and whatever. And I don't know what we're going to get. I know that Jake Allen's capable of shutting out anybody, but I know he's also capable of giving up 5 goals. I don't like the fact that Boston's the one that's rolling into him. I will say this, though. The last time they played Boston, they were in Boston. It was a dad's weekend in St. Louis. If they didn't sneak out with a win, it was a darn competitive game. And Boston had every bit of their hands full. The part that scares me about Boston is the top line in Boston's running really, really well. So again, it's confusing, conflicting signals here. I don't really know where to go. Now, what I do know is there's enough value on the rest of the slate that Boston line is going to make or break you tonight. You're going to have to get it right. Either you get it right and it goes off, or you get it right by fading it and it doesn't go off. One of those two scenarios is what's going to pan out. It's going to make or break a lot of people on this slate because there is value in that Boston offense. It's just that St. Louis is a defensive team. Boston's a defensive team. It could be a low-scoring game. Jake Allen could be bad. Kubanen could be bad. I wish Rask was playing, honestly, but Kubanen could be bad. That top St. Louis line might reunite, have some chemistry, and put 2 or 3 goals in it. I don't know how to evaluate this game. The numbers are conflicting in all directions. So tonight, the whole slate might be more of a feel slate as opposed to a numbers slate, because there's another thing I'll talk to when we get into centers here in a little bit. When I scroll down to look at the Gibson and the Smith game with Calgary, I'm going to see that Anaheim's rolling pretty good on offense. The first line scored 3 goals in 3 games. The second line scored 2 goals in 3 games. Coincidentally, the Calgary defense, their top line has given 3 goals in 3 games. Their second line has given 3 goals in 3 games. Doesn't matter where the 1s and the 2s match up here. They're going against a crappy, leaky defense. So I think Mike Smith's in trouble. I think John Gibson's pretty safe. I think that these skaters are just going to go into Calgary and I think they're going to put up some goals. Now, Calgary can score too. Even though Anaheim's a little more of a defensive team, Anaheim's on the road, whatever. I think the game can score some goals. When I look at the Calgary shoots the second most, we're going right back like we were in the Buffalo game. Calgary shoots the second most, and they're facing the 23rd most allowing shot team in Anaheim. So much for shot suppression and the mindset of them being a defensive team. Am I right? That's a bump for Calgary. Calgary should put some volume on Gibson. That might make Gibson the better play because it doesn't look like we're going to get a lot of shots on Ranta in this game, even though we should get more than usual. But we're going to end up getting a lot of shots on Gibson. He's going to let a couple in, but if he gets the win, he might take on a lot of shots tonight. If he gets a shutout tonight, this is a good GPP gamble. If he ends up standing on his head and getting shut out tonight, it might be a 50-point shutout. So just bear those things in mind. Make your decisions accordingly. That's kind of what we're trying to do with DFS in general. As I flip the page here and I go into a little bit of the value plays, I'm going to tell you a little bit of who I like. When we said Montreal, we'd be looking at like a center in Druin. Although he's not bringing a lot of value with his line of 2 goals, 5 assists on 16 shots on goal for 5,400, that's not even bringing you 2x value. And here's going to be the problem within the center position, finding even 2 to 2.5x value. Most of the time what we're looking for is 2.5 to 3x. That's when I start getting excited. But I'm not going to see it at the center position tonight in great spots. I'm going to have to gamble. I'm going to look at Malkin. He's cold. Malkin at 9,200 is priced way too high. Now, a few weeks ago, he was a lock in cash, and he was a value because he was running at 24, 25 points per game on the average over a 10-game sample. Now he's down to 17.5 points per game. He's only got 4 goals, 9 assists in his past 10 games. He's only putting 34 shots on goal. Add that up to fantasy scoring on Fanduel, you get an average of 17.4 points. Divide that by 9,200 in salary, or 9.2K, and what you end up with is a 1.9. That's pretty crappy. And it's really crappy for the $9,200 price tag. However, it is Malkin, and Malkin can go off at any given night, score 45. So you're going to want access to him. How do you get access to him? Through his wings. Hagelin's cheap. Hornquist is shooting the puck like a maniac. That's why. You get your access to Malkin's big game by assists or him setting up his wings and then scoring. So if Malkin has a game where he scores 2 and ends up with 2 assists, I guarantee you Hagelin and Hornquist had a good game beside him. See how that works? So don't take the risk on the $9,200 guy that isn't living up to his salary right now. but he does have the potential, so get that access through the cheaper wings. That's DFS tip number 313 for you. Stepan in Arizona. We talked about Arizona being in a good spot. So 12.2 points average over his last 10 games. That's a 2.0 value, 2.0x value compared to his salary. Dvorak is better on that second line. 5 goals, 2 assists, 32 shots on goal and blocked shots at a 5K salary. 12.7 points at a 5K salary is a 2.5x. Better value. Write this stuff down if I'm going too fast for you. I don't want to be on this thing for an hour for you, but I'm trying to drop as many nuggets as I possibly can as we go through here. I don't want to, show you every single thing that we do. I'll show you a little bit of the research process and what we're doing, but more or less what I'm trying to do is just talk to you and show you where these spots are. Ryan O'Reilly, not 2x. Jack Eichel, don't know where to put him yet. He's only come back for 2 games. He's a stud, don't get me wrong. If you want to run him tonight, go for it. But until we see some numbers materialize, I don't know if he's running good or bad for what is a $7,400 salary. That's a bite in the ass. When I look at Riley Nash, there's exposure to Boston if you want it. If you don't want to pay up for Pasternak or Marchand tonight because they're going up against St. Louis, you're like me, you don't know how it's going to work out, grab Riley Nash. Because if those two had a good game, Riley Nash probably had a good game. Riley Nash spent some time down on the line 2 or line 3, whichever one it was. Still, over his last 10 games, has 5 goals, 7 assists, and 23 shots. At a sub 6K salary, that's 15.3 points per game over his last 10 and a 2.6x value. 2.6x value is the highest number if you're paying attention. It's the highest number I've given you so far. Does that mean Riley Nash is the best play on the slate? No. I mean, it might. It means that he's in a damn good spot. When I look at Krejci, it's not 2x. I look at Getzlaf. I mentioned Anaheim. Getzlaf's interesting because he's got 2 goals, 10 assists on 26 shots, but his price is $7,400. That's 14.6 points at $7,400, which is barely 2x. So the pricing makes a huge difference in daily fantasy sports. If the prices, their production goes up and down through the year, and their production kind of chases it, or their pricing kind of chases it. So as their production goes up, it tries to, but it never comes down as fast as it goes up. That's the problem with the end of the year in these sports. The deeper we get into the seasons, everybody's priced up. Look at baseball right now. Everybody's priced down. You can go stack your Colorado Rockies and your Yankees and run Clayton Kershaw and not have a whole hell of a lot of problem right now in the early part of the baseball season. But when we get to August, man, it's going to be different. People that have no business being $5,000 players are going to be $5,000 players. Just like hockey right now. You won't see Malkin's price come down from $9,200 down to like $8,500 where it should be right now. You won't find it. It's not going to happen. We don't have enough time left in the season. He's not going to go cold enough, long enough for that to happen. So you have to pay attention to those value multipliers and constantly be running some sort of sample size, whether it's 5 games or 10 games, or maybe you use season numbers or whatever. I like to kind of get the hots and the colds because as they rise and they fall and they rise and they fall, then I can play the yin and yang, the yo-yo game with their price tag, with that value multiplier, and determine whether or not a guy's a good buy or a bad buy. And really, that's all I can do. I look at the games that they're in, the matchups that they're in, and their production lately, and then the price that I'm being asked to pay for them, and then I have to determine, is it a good buy or a bad buy? And do I want a couple of his teammates with him or not? All that stuff comes into play, and that's what makes good DFS players, versus bad DFS players. And hopefully you learn by paying attention to these videos that what makes good DFS players, and you can start emulating that. And if you want even more help, you come inside and you get the coaching from dfsarmy.com, because that's what we do. I take people under my wing and I talk to them all day long about this stuff. That's just what I do. When I look at the wings, the guys I'm looking at, Gallagher's a little low on the value at 2.2x. Lehkonen is a little bit up there at 2.6x. Gallenchuk, if he plays he's day-to-day with a wrist, he's at 2.7x, great value. Hornquist, 2.7x, great value. Hagelin, 2.1 value, not great. But here's what's great about Hagelin, dirt cheap. If you need savings, he's only 4K. So you might take the 2.1x to 4K because it allows you to go from, say, Clayton Keller at 5,900 up to Hornquist at, Clayton Keller's only a 2x, maybe. Hornquist is a 2.7x for 600 more. So from 5,900 up to 6,500, I go from 11.9 points in Keller to 17.4 points for Hornquist, and I'm in a better matchup tonight. So if I ran somebody like, I don't know, instead of Hagelin, if I ran somebody a little bit higher like a Lehkonen at 800, that might not allow me to go up from Keller to Hornquist, and that might make my team overall better. If that makes sense. That's how you use those value punts sometimes. If you want to use a value punt, though, I'd tell you it's Richard Panik in Arizona tonight. 3 goals, 3 assists, 29 shots in his last 10 games, 10.6 points for a $3,900 salary. And he's on the top line with Keller and Stepan. 2.7x he's run over the last 10 games. If you're going to get a value of $39,000 or $4,000, $3,900 or $4,000, somewhere in there, you'd rather have a 2.7x salary than a 2.1x. Now, where you could argue is, well, I'm not really running a lot of Coyotes tonight, so I don't really need Panik. So I'd really rather correlate and grab both Hagelin and Hornquist and get access to Malkin, so I don't have to pay Malkin's price. I'm not going to argue with that. If that's where you're going tonight, I'm not going to argue with it. It makes sense. I would tell you that in a vacuum, apples to apples, side by side, right now, Panik's the better player. But if those aren't the factors that mean the most to you because you're going to correlate with Pittsburgh, or you like the matchup better, or you've got numbers to show what you're, then do it, man. Don't take my word for gospel. Do it. And it's part of the coaching that we offer inside DFS Army. Is guys will say, as long as you bring the heat and you got your numbers backed up, baby, I'm with you. I'll support any play you make. It's when you come to me and say, hey, who's better, this guy or this guy? I don't know what your ultimate game plan is. If you're just wanting straight apples to apples, I can tell you with numbers who's better. But I don't know what that means for the matchup tonight. Reinert in Buffalo's in a good spot. Pominville's in a good spot. Here's the problem. On the slate, you heard me say as high as Panik and Hornquist and Gallenchuk at 2.7x. Pasta is a 2.9. Pastrnak in Boston's a 2.9. Problem is he goes up against St. Louis. That is a $7,300 risk. That's great to get those 21 points. But he might be in a bad matchup tonight and might not get the 21 you need to translate that number. Might get you 12. And 12 ain't going to get it done at a $7,300 salary. Marchand's even worse. Marchand's a 2.7x. He's right up there with Panik. If I said, do you want 2.7x, Panik or Marchand, $3,900 or $8,400. Well, if they're both 2.7x, buy the points. Why would I buy 10.6 points when I can buy 23 points? See what I'm saying? But the overall point is they're going up against St. Louis. Maybe he's not going to hit that number tonight. Maybe his matchup's bad. Reichel, 2.4x in Anaheim. Silfverberg, 2.2x, and they're in a great spot. They might exceed that 2.4x. I mean, after all, it's just an average over 10 games. There's been as many games above it as below it, in theory. That's what playing these averages does. When I go down into defense, we'll wrap this up. Petry, 2.1x. Letang and Schultz are okay for access to Pittsburgh, but they're a little overpriced. Even Schultz at $4,500 is overpriced for his production. Ekman Larson, if he plays tonight in Arizona, 2.5x is not a bad place if you're going to target Arizona. Ristolainen, if you're targeting Buffalo, but the problem is Ristolainen's not a 2x player right now. Krug and Boston, here we go again with Boston going up against St. Louis. 3.4x. 3 goals, 11 assists, 50 shots and blocks in the last 10 at a 6K salary. 20.4 points for 6K. 3.5 almost times salary. That's great. The matchup's not. Doesn't mean you can't play him. Maybe you see that as 6K and say, hey, I don't have to pay the $7,300 for Pastrnak or the $8,400 for Marchand. I can take Riley Nash at $5,800 and I can take Krug at $6,000 and get 2 of that offense in case they go off. And if they don't go off, I didn't spend a lot to try. Golden. Do that. That's smart. Being a little cheap, but it's smart. When you look at Pietrangelo on the other side in St. Louis, probably the only St. Louis player I'd play right now. 3.9x, almost 4x. Dude is on fire. And if you look, there was a tweet that somebody posted, shows that the way he was with the Bouwmeester is terrible, and the way he is without Bouwmeester is awesome. And since Bouwmeester's been on the shelf, all of a sudden Petro's taken off again. Player of the week last week on defensively for offensive defensive players. Outstanding. Petro's underpriced for his production right now. Way, 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 way underpriced. For you to get an almost 4x multiplier, it's ridiculous. 6 goals, 7 assists, 60 shots and blocks. He's a machine right now for $5,800. He's better than Krug. Montour in Anaheim isn't bad either. 3 goals, 2 assists, 30 shots on blocks for 4,100. If you need to save money, there you go. You might take somebody like a Petry at 4,500 in Montreal, but you'd probably rather take a Montour in Anaheim with a better matchup and $400 cheaper and a better salary multiplier. Makes more sense. And Giordano in Calgary is another one at 2.4x. I mean, he can score. So, I mean, that's roughly where you're going tonight. Hopefully you wrote some of those down. You've got basically my value list targeted. If you were a VIP, there might be still a spot left or two. We've run a league tonight for our VIPs that you can certainly jump into. The link is inside the Slack forum. So become a VIP today. Get your email. You might get in there in time. It's a 20-man league. We like to compete against each other. We're not after taking each other's money. It's usually really cheap, $1, $2, something like that. We just like to see how we stack up. And we like to use game theory against ourselves. And we like to kind of practice and sharpen our skills where we can all talk about why we did what we did and then kind of evaluate, was that smart, was that not smart? That's just another way that we bootstrap each other inside the community and make each other better. And then when we get a little bit better, we unleash ourselves on you. And when you see all our army hats on top of the leaderboards, you get it. Again, this is a multifaceted community that has tools, projections, optimizers, the whole bit, coaching that talks back and forth and helps you become a better player. And by doing so, by practicing and by talking about the methods that we use to find value and the stacking versus non-stacking and cash versus GPP and all that stuff, that's what we do. If that's the type of information that you need, you're sick of trying to figure this out on your own, you need to become a VIP. Follow the link in the comments section and jump in. We'd love to have you. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon. I know there's a lot for a 4-game slate. Hopefully it was a ton of information I dumped on you, and hopefully we talk at you again tomorrow. Later, guys.